Welcome to the panel discussion where we'll focus on sports, OTT, and social networks for rights holders. My name is Krestin Harrington, and I will be the moderator of this panel discussion. On the panel, we have Andrew from FIBA Media. We have Thomas from LNR, the National Rugby League, and Jakob from Wildmoka. So please, all of you, just give a bit of background about yourself and what you do at the company, starting with you, Andrew.
Sure, thanks, Krestin. Welcome to everyone who's joined the conference today. Great to be with you. So I'm the Managing Director of FIBA Media. FIBA Media is a 17-year joint venture between FIBA, the International Basketball Federation, and DAZN, and it essentially looks after the production, distribution, and commercialization of all of FIBA's, I guess what we would call our premium media properties. So the Men's and Women's World Cups, the various Continental Cups, including Eurobasket, for instance, on both the men's and women's side, and a range of qualifier and underage junior events that are within the FIBA program. So I head that up, and obviously, as I said, we look after both the production of all of those events, so essentially creating and distributing the signal, plus also commercializing in terms of rights sales, the management of our OTT service, live basketball television, and also the monetization of data streams and other highlights properties.
Okay, Thomas, please.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Thomas Otton. I'm the Director of Global Communications for the LNR. It's the National Rugby League in France. I'm also in charge of the CSR for all the sustainability part. Well, the LNR organizes and promotes the Rugby Pro Championships, Top 14, and Second Division Pro D2. In France, we have two professional rugby divisions, Top 14 and Pro D2. And we just launched a new championship back in February, which is called the Super Sevens, which is a sevens rugby championship, a brand new experience, both entertainment and sports.
Okay, Jakob.
So my name is Jakob. I'm with Wildmoka. I'm the VP of Sales in EMEA. I actually also have quite of a technical background, but today it's about Wildmoka's digital platform. Actually, we consider ourselves rather as a media factory for digital content. And that is for customers like rights holders and actually people who bought the rights from the rights holders. So the broadcasters who use our platform to maximize on the return on investment. And they do that typically by implementing a strong and an ambitious digital strategy that allows them to not only get subscribers from the linear channels, but also on the digital channels, and to monetize there as well. And in order to do that, well, we have multiple different production chains that they can use in order to be speedy, fast, create much more in the volume, have a great reliability, because that is the basis of everything. And then, yeah, then they go.
Okay, sounds good. Now, COVID-19 is still an issue we're not quite out of yet, collectively around the world. I'd like you to share with the audience, specifically with the rights holders, how much creativity had to come into play. What were some of the things you learned during the process when there were no sports being televised and so forth? Andrew, let's start with you in FIBA Media.
Sure, thanks, Krestin. I think first and foremost, we've been both fortunate and working very hard within FIBA to get basketball up and running at multiple levels, and actually just came off the back of finally completing the most recent Basketball Champions League season in Athens. So we actually transferred that competition to being a final 8 over the last few days, and so that championship culminated in the Spanish team Burgos taking the title last weekend, which was magnificent news to get basketball back up and running. And we've also just announced that our next set of continental qualifier windows will happen in a series of hubs throughout late November, which is obviously exceptional news for getting international basketball up and running. But when it came to I guess, the COVID period itself, we probably had two particular strands of activity. One was reaching out to our broadcast partners and essentially assessing with them what was the content that was either within our existing capabilities or that we could potentially produce that would be most helpful for them. And typically that came down to full-length archive programming or the creation of additional ancillary content like player highlights packages or retrospectives looking back at different events that we've had in the past. Probably the other stream was our support of, I guess, the FIBA social media channels or other digital outlets in which we produced quite a significant amount of specific content for them. And in particular, one that was probably worth highlighting, and I guess where we started getting into thinking through content formats that we might not necessarily have produced otherwise. We created a series called Run That Back, which was a co-production between our digital marketing team and our production team, which actually reintroduced some incredibly high-profile basketballers who had competed at World Cup level. We had a couple of episodes involving the Australian women's team who had previously qualified for the final of the World Cup, and the French men's national team, including a couple of their NBA stars involved. And they essentially looked back at a compressed replay of a famous game from their recent past. And the players actually gave us an insight into what it was like coming out of the change rooms, what they were discussing at various timeouts, how they were feeling as the game progressed, and all of this in quite a jovial, sort of banter-driven way. And it actually turned out to be a really, really interesting set of programs that we're able to produce. And while it was initially actually only meant for our social media channels, actually a couple of our broadcast partners actually got involved as well and redistributed on their own platforms. So there were some interesting initiatives that came out of it. And I think there's certain things that we will continue to do in the future that are essentially derived from that period.
Now, Thomas, you guys had live shows with players from home. Elaborate, on that. Is similar to what FIBA Media was doing, or?
Yeah, it's the same idea. It was a tough time for everybody, and also for rugby, because we had no rugby matches, no championships during more than 6 months. So we had to find ideas. Of course, recapped matches were a good idea. Canal Plus, who is our official broadcaster worldwide, had some recap match. We had our own recap match on our OTT platform. We have a membership platform called My Rugby, where we had a recap match as well. But we also needed some live. People were missing live during this COVID when they were home. So we invented with our communications agency, actually, a live show. We could call it a show that was streamed on our social media mainly, with all the top players of the top 14. So the players that we all know, they were at home. And it wasn't only about talking about sports with them, because there weren't really a lot of sports at that time. It was also about talking about their personalities, who they are. Actually, in rugby, we try to approach our sports and our brands, Top 14, Pro D2, not only from a sports perspective, but also from a cultural perspective, and we try to talk about much more than what happens on the field. So it was somehow a great opportunity to discover players when they're in their intimacy at home, enter their intimacy. Some were in their gardens, some were in their kitchen, and that was really interesting. We also had a very, of course, various ideas for them, not just talk about sports. We also had some artists, some singers, some humorists who intervened. In the end, it was an 8-hour live show, live streaming, with all these different interventions, and we did that not only to entertain our fans and even new fans, because we had a lot of new fans thanks to that, but also for a more useful reason. There was a French association in charge of the older people who are alone and were even more alone during the COVID period at home. So we did an online global bid, and people. In the end, we had more than 35,000 euros thanks to people participating. So it was both useful for the fans, very entertaining, but also useful to help people who were at need.
And I would assume it's a win-win situation for athletes specifically taking part of this, because I would assume their social audience would grow, tremendously as well, just showing a different side that they typically don't see, whether it's banter and so forth. Now, Jakob, over to you. Obviously, you're a little different, but you being a cloud-based service or having this option, how did you respond, or what did you find? What was your experience with COVID?
I think it was from our customers. I mean, they were very relieved that they had a service like from Wildmoka, which is a cloud-based service, as you said. It is a software as a service. So the only thing that you need in order to use it is actually a web browser. And you can run it from any computer, whether it is at home or wherever you are. So that actually helped them to quickly produce all those content. I mean, what Thomas just said, as example, we have seen that with multiple of our customers producing shows between where, let's say, as we do right now, we have a Zoom call here, and you can actually give that signal directly, ingesting it in Wildmoka and sending it to social media if you would like to. And we have seen that during COVID times. We have seen other customers creating esports and not really going into the esports competition that but rather on a way where they say, okay, you're a subscriber of my pay TV channel, and you're a well-known player in this football league, and we basically create now a FIFA esport game with those well-known players and those people that we have selected among our subscribers, which was, I would say, quite successful in the sense of it was entertaining and well received by the public. And then obviously, I mean, since we worked with so many different sports and different broadcasters, for us the pause was much lower. So I mean, Bundesliga came back, I think, after 6 weeks or 7 weeks of pause, and Series A as well. So it was, well, there was definitely an impact that we have seen on our customer side, and I think we could actually give them the needed flexibility and agility to react on it. And as some customer puts it, I said, well, we were very fortunate to have you. You literally saved our bottoms, whatever you want to say, but really positive feedback.
Yeah, of course. As a sports enthusiast, and not to have sports for an extended period of time, obviously you need to keep engaged with the audience as well. And what you guys have done at your respective companies seem to have worked. Now, I'd like to address the audience. If you do have questions for our panelists, you can use your chat function at any time during the discussion and address either Andrew, Jakob, or Thomas directly or collectively, a group question. So I'd like you to take advantage of that in the time that you can have access to these panelists. Now, moving on to the idea of how to grow your audience internationally, whether it's, an innovative, if innovation is the answer in this direction, the use of highlights you guys have already spoken on. Andrew, in terms of the combination of the social networks, what have you done differently or new, to expand your audience globally?
Sure. I think, there's obviously a couple of points here. I mean, in terms of the way that FIBA operates, we have a couple of dual track activities. I guess more of our communications directed strategy is utilizing the social media platforms and the content that's distributed on each of those to effectively bring to light and bring visibility to FIBA's competitions, keep fans updated with what's going on, give them behind the scenes access and the like. There's also the point that, I guess, for our more commercially oriented activities, which is obviously one of the primary concerns for FIBA media, is the ways that we can try to expand both the visibility and reach of our competitions, and also obviously the money or revenue that's connected to those. So FIBA has what is probably generally renowned to be probably the strongest, at least of the Olympic federations, and certainly objectively has figures that suggest it's one of the best in the world, full stop, within sports in terms of its spread and reach of its various social platforms. It's had an extremely active, I guess, approach to social media. We've been generally quite strong for a number of years in the way that we've distributed both in-game and post-game highlights, and really try to take advantage of those platforms to not only inform fans where they are there, but also to probably even more recently trying to actually drive them to consume the live product. So we've become a lot better at actually creating easy journeys from social media postings to actually consuming live content wherever a person is in the world through one of our broadcast partners. So that's a really key step of trying to get a more holistic approach to the way that we use social media, rather than just having different departments looking after those different activities, but not necessarily feeding back into a beneficial loop for everyone. In terms of how we drive, I guess, greater revenue across a greater number of territories, FIBA's been very, very sensible and smart in the way that it's taken its events to a lot of new territories. We came off the back of what was probably the greatest ever basketball World Cup last year in China for the 2019 World Cup. It was a truly amazing event. I think we had a reach of about 3 billion audience across the world, which was phenomenal, and astounding figures like 1.5 billion video views across social and digital platforms. And that obviously took foresight in terms of actually taking the event to a territory where it's never been held before, and it was probably the biggest international event to be held there since the Beijing 2008 Olympics. So I guess we're fortunate that we have a global sport, one that is immensely popular in a number of in many territories, in fact most territories, and also even more and more a global spread of our superstars that are essentially popping up from everywhere, from China to Australia to Argentina to Greece to Russia. So we are incredibly lucky that we actually have a lot of player assets and personalities which are representing all of these different countries.
Right. Now, Thomas, in terms of what you guys are doing now, you have a very focused, you're targeting particular regions, right? Japan, and the UK. Talk to us a bit more about, how you've expanded, with the website, the Top 14 website and so forth, and the strategy you have in line with this. Are you reaching your goal? What's been the response thus far?
Oh, we just started the expansion, the marketing expansion with Rugby World Cup in Japan, with a serious focus on expanding, accompanying our TV broadcaster who sells the TV rights internationally, who is Canal+. So depending on the markets, Canal+ would work, of course, to find TV broadcasters in the different regions, and we, as a right holder, we would commit to a marketing plan with a marketing budget to accompany this expansion in this targeted country. So the countries we're talking about here is Japan. Of course, there was a Rugby World Cup there, so it was the best timing, and also the UK. Let's say with a more English approach globally. So that's the first thing. So we developed customized marketing plans in each country. Of course, we had a global international website in English. So that was maybe the focus on year one. But then we developed through social media specific content from the French, from of course the French communications content team, but also customized content for Japan and customized content for the UK. For that, we were helped by the arrival just after the World Cup in the last September of a very famous Japanese player who is called Matsushima. He came in the Clermont team, and that really helps, of course, to talk about our top 14 championship in Japan. So we develop specific content with this player, not only, of course, but also with Matsushima, and we rised in maybe 2 months after he arrived. We doubled the number of followers on the top 14 Japan account. Then for the same reasons, talking about the UK, we have of course players from the UK in our championship. We did the same thing. So that was our international approach. But today the stake is that we are very small internationally, whereas top 14 is considered as one of the best rugby championships in the world. It's very strong in France. We have a great visibility with Canal+. Every Sunday night on Canal+, you have the top 14 now. But our objective is to try to grow also internationally, knowing that, for instance, 33% of the players of the last World Cup were playing in top 14 or Pro D2, which is our second division championship.
Okay. Now I know there's a question, but Jakob, would you like to chime in?
Yes, of course. So thanks. Actually, what we see, I mean, as I said at the very beginning, we work with the rights creators, or as I call them, so the leagues, as Andrew and Thomas are representing today, and also to those people who actually buy the rights. What we see more and more is that the leagues have a dual approach, selling rights in the core markets, but then having their own OTT platform for those markets, whereas they do not sell the rights, but basically go directly to the consumer with their OTT platform. And also to establish an own B2B platform where they basically produce content for different target markets. If I can take up this example about Japan as example, if you have a Japanese player, it makes a lot of sense to have highlights biased on this Japanese player if you want to sell something to the Japanese market. And the same for probably each nation you can then go. So you need basically to have different summaries for each market in order to give the fans in that market what they want and what can be sold actually. And we support that with automatically creating of highlight summaries as example, where you can say, okay, I want to generate a highlight for this game, which should have all goals in the case of a football game, but also if there are strong actions by this Japanese player or this nation player, then it should be included as well. And then you have basically still the choice whether you want to send it as it is, as it has been proposed by the machine, or whether you want to have a human having a final touch. And I think it is always important that you can create those things very, very fast, because in sports, the first who is publishing it is basically the guy who gets all the views, especially if there's no exclusivity. I mean, if you publish something to YouTube and somebody else publishes more or less the same game to YouTube or different highlights, the first will get nearly all views. And if you want to monetize on that, then you should do that. And the same is probably for the B2B platform. You need to give it to your affiliates as soon as possible.
Okay, we have a question. I think we can address this now from Kyle. And this will be addressed to all of you. I'm sure you can see the question, but I will read it aloud. Did you find access to talent was better during the COVID lockdown? If so, how much of a positive impact do you think it has on the relationship between the sports league or organization and its players and talent?
I can take this one, Chris, if that helps. So, look, I think fundamentally, yes, it was easier during the full lockdown period to get access to athletes, particularly high-profile ones, just because of the lack of conflicts in their schedule. Obviously them majority of them not being able to even be in full training. I think on the flip side to that as well, I think at least certain leagues and federations are getting a better understanding of the mutual benefits that can be achieved through cooperating with players, for instance. So the Run That Back series that I mentioned for us earlier on, we actually actively encourage the players who are involved in that to actually redistribute the live feed through their own social platforms. So it was essentially a you help us, then we'll try to help you in terms of being able to produce some high quality content that was obviously something that their followers would probably be particularly interested in. And I think it's one of the great aspects of the way that content production and distribution seems to be moving for sport, on particularly within various social networks, that actually it's so much more about visibility rather than retention of content exclusively. And actually, if there are ways in which we can have this content redistributed through people or various accounts that are very, very relevant to that content, then it's essentially a situation in which everyone wins.
Yeah, Thomas, you know, in terms of you getting this Japanese player, I mean, I guess, was that relatively easy for you? Is that a simple process? Because with just one sport, you're focused on one sport, is the goal just to get as many different big names in that sport and slowly expand?
Actually, the COVID really helped us at the Rugby League. Well, it was something that we started way before the COVID, is to try to work on the players' personalities, even storification of some players. You know, rugby is very team sports. It's like you can win only collectively. Maybe there are less stars than in other sports, and we try to, you know, if you want to attract new audiences, if you want to please the younger ones, you have to create stars as well. So we had started with a dedicated editorial approach on our social media, for instance, around some key players, on their personalities, not on, of course, their great performance on the field. That was the first reason to be interested in them, but also how to develop their personalities apart from as a rugby player. So this is something really started. Not always easy, because we're in a very team collective oriented sport, and then the players belong to their clubs, they don't belong to the league, and of course the lockdown helped, because the players were available. Some clubs, even, you know, the smaller ones, closed, so we could we contacted directly the players, because the clubs didn't want to be contacted anymore. So this was a good way to create this relationship, and once again, the 8 hours lives we did with about 30 players, preparing everything with them, briefing them, etc. It created also a relationship. They loved it. They shared it on their social media, of course. So this was a way as well to start with saying, hey, we exist, because some players don't even know there's a league. You know, when they play in a championship, they don't know who organizes the championship. They just have their club. So it's a way to be visible, but also to create engagement with them, to engage the players. No, we had a positive feedback. So I don't see any negative parts for this regarding this question from Kyle.
Okay. Anything, Jakob, to add to this?
Well, obviously, we are only enablers, and so we didn't speak with any talent ourselves. But what we know is that our customers have used our platform, especially for bringing those third parts to social media. And also what is important is you can actually, from our platform, take a snapshot or a highlight, if you want to say, and to give it to the talent itself, so that the talent can then publish it on their social media accounts. Because what we found very often is it's great if you have a league and if you are a broadcaster and you have your followers, but the real followers are those who follow the stars, the players themselves.
I think it's a really important point, actually, Jakob. And I think we've seen a few leagues and surprisingly, with MLB being one of the ones that sort of had really led that field a year or two ago in terms of setting up a specific platform for its own players to distribute content. And it's definitely something that we're trying to encourage more and more, and using obviously fast clipping services. I think it'd also be remiss of us not to return to one of actually Jacob's points from earlier about the use of content to create personalized services, or certainly more personalized services. And I think it's, given that we're talking about OTT as one of the topics here, I think we've sort of really only started to scratch the surface in terms of what an OTT service or what a digital service can do in terms of delivering a sports content experience, and the concept of simply delivering a live feed in the same way that you would a linear broadcasting channel via OTT is not particularly exciting in and of itself. On the other hand, the capacity, and particularly almost the infinite capacity of OTT services or digitally driven services to almost do two things. One, to make an immense amount of content available, and then to be able to, I guess, filter or amplify that content in a way in which it is most beneficial or most relevant to an individual user, whether through their preferences or information that you have on them already. That is an incredibly powerful thing, and it's obviously driven very much helpfully by service providers like Wildmoka that can actually create that very, very dedicated series of highlights or clips that are relevant for whatever reason, whether it's because a player is from a particular country or a particular club, or whatever it is that is building the passion for that particular fan. And I think the second part, and one thing we're very much looking at within FIBA Media, is how to take our live OTT streams, which we have on our live basketball TV product, and actually make it an enhanced viewing experience as opposed to a typical linear television experience. And whether that's making it incredibly personalized by delivering statistics that are completely relevant for an individual, whether they be linked to their own fantasy teams that they might have selected for a particular competition, or being able to essentially have, I guess, overlaid betting opportunities, which might be integrated into the feed that are very relevant for that particular individual user. I think that's really that next step of OTT development, where we sort of simply move past having a live feed, maybe having one or two commentary options in different languages, and actually take it into a really, really personalized experience.
Yeah, that was the next point, the fan engagement and, how to personalize things and the crucial components of the OTT and the social network success. This idea is analytics, the easiest way to accomplish that in terms of personalization, because, ideally as a fan, I would assume the goal would be that someone visits their platform and everything that they would want to know about their game would be automatically fed to them. Is this the idea, Andrew?
I think ultimately it is. I think there's a bad name that personal data collection has had that is essentially linked to privacy infringement and the like. On the other hand, there's a whole lot of data collection that is simply related to trying to work out what it is that a user might be interested in at any given time and trying to feed that to them. And you've obviously had platforms, in particular Netflix, that have espoused the incredible AI that sits behind their platform that can ensure that you're recommended whatever it is that you're likely to want or will potentially want at any given time. I think a lot of sports platforms probably haven't necessarily had to get over that hump yet, because we haven't necessarily made such a massive aggregation of content that it really needs to be filtered in a particularly effective way. But I think as we take advantage of different services and different opportunities, that we actually look to aggregate a much wider breadth of content, whether from different competitions within our own sport or otherwise, we'll have to get better at making our digital properties be able to surface what it is that an individual user might want. And me as a user, if I can be served something that is incredibly relevant to me on a personal level, I think that also takes us into a space where the concept of going and looking for pirated feeds or essentially unlicensed feeds also becomes something that is there are more attractive options out there. And I think personalization in particular is potentially a really, really major next step when it comes to the delivery of live content for sport.
Yeah, and Jakob, I like, you believe in this. Normally the expression is less is more, but in terms of content and saturation, more is more.
Yeah,
Is what you
absolutely.
found.
I mean, more is more. That is what I say in order to characterize that what we see. I mean, we analyze a lot of, together with our customers, how successful their operations are. And so we analyze that together with them. And from time to time, we are even able to tell other people about it. As example, we wrote white papers about the use of French television and for Canal Plus in the expert mode and so on. So what you can actually see is that as more as you publish into social media, as more, well, you said visibility, I would even say it is also discoverability. It is a kind of a recommendation engine fed by your social media peers. When they tell you, oh, did you see that? Then this is a great link. And that is absolutely important to get people back to your OTT platform, where you actually make probably most of the money, either by subscription or also if you insert advertisement, you will get on the OTT platform a much higher CPM than you will get on the social media platform. And ultimately also to the linear channels of your broadcast partners. So I think it's a whole ecosystem that is in fruition of themselves. As more if you publish, as more people you get on OTT, as more people you get on linear. And the other part is also true. If you don't do it, then you're probably forgotten. I think. I mean, if you don't continuously push out content to social media, then at the moment, if you only do it on a Saturday, it is probably not good enough.
Right, understandable. Now we don't have so much time, and I definitely did want to touch on the idea of monetization of content, on the platforms or on social networks. Which models are you currently using? Which ones are you considering to use? Andrew.
Yeah, so I guess to take a step back, I guess within FIBA Media, we actually try to help our social media teams through the provision of content rather than necessarily managing those channels ourselves. I think when it comes to the concept of monetization on social media platforms is a really, really tricky one. The way that social platforms or either provide value through advertising or otherwise around sports content is probably very, very different than the premiums we have generally come to expect from advertising association with what we see as incredibly valuable and exclusive content. So I think we're still a long way away from being able to sort of generate substantial amounts or material amounts through the monetization of highlights content or otherwise. I think it's interesting, even for instance, that YouTube, which is used for a lot of live broadcasting, particularly for either second or third tier properties, or I guess what we might call the long tail of content, whether or not it's junior or second division type content. When you have a live experience on YouTube, you're essentially still being delivered a pre-roll ad, and that's it. Whereas YouTube, to be able to replicate or at least come close to replicating that monetization experience of television, has to be able to deliver a way in which you can actually serve advertising during natural breaks in play, for instance, during timeouts, during halftime and the like. Otherwise, it's essentially just getting eyeballs on your content and a relatively piddling amount of shared revenue that will come from that. So I think we have generally taken the view that social media at the moment is far more about marketing, both for marketing our properties, trying to market the availability of live coverage within either our own services or through our third-party broadcast partners across the world.
Okay, we have another question that's just popped up. It is, what are your thoughts on creating OTT pop-up services vis-a-vis a permanent channel?
Well, maybe.
Please, yeah.
Maybe let me take it, because I mean, that is a question that a lot of our customers ask themselves. So it's very easy. I mean, if you have through the whole year competitions, you do probably want to have a permanent channel. But if you have event-based competitions, then it is much better to have a pop-up channel, especially if you have, let's say, I mean, as I said, I mean, there's this tennis tournament right now in Paris. And if you have the rights of all the matches, then you need about 20 parallel channels, but you only need them for a week or two. And then you basically scale them down again. And it is a cost question. So obviously, yes, you would like to pop them up and to get them down. That is an agility that helps you a lot that was not able before the OTT world, I would say. You cannot do that on a satellite.
All right, now we don't have much time. I did want you to address this issue, Thomas, because you're a bit different, you know, in some respects. And also I'd like to collectively, you all to think of the evolution of the market, you know, closing words, you know, before we conclude our conversation. Thomas, now you guys heavily rely on broadcasters, you know, and then sponsorship is the way most of the in advertising and so forth. Is this enough to grow in the respective markets that you'd like to grow in?
Today it is, and we also have we are lucky enough to have a great broadcaster with Canal Plus, who already has different offers, customized offers depending on the audience, the type of clients you want. You know, it's a heavily competitive market in France, so they already thought about this. OTT solutions, of course, they have a great app today. I see Jakob smiling, and that's true. It's one of the leaders worldwide for also digital services, Canal Plus. And today in the countries that we target, we're not targeting worldwide. You know, OTT has a cost. OTT platforms has a cost, and you have to amortize it. And for that's the reason why today we really prefer to rely on strong partnerships with our TV broadcasters. Our sports is maybe less universal than football, for instance. So we can have a more country by country approach, and the best partner for that, and to understand also the needs of the audiences, the customized needs of the audiences, is of course a local TV broadcaster. But maybe in a few years we will diversify. I'm sure we will always be tied with strong broadcasters, because today monetization is mainly coming from that. I don't have proof of any other sports where OTT independent platforms bring more money than what TV broadcasters do. But maybe it will evolve. But today, for us, the model is clear. We are, of course, following what is happening, but our TV broadcasters are becoming themselves digital services-oriented broadcasters. So we don't need to create our own platforms.
All right. We have about a minute left. Any parting words, Andrew, in terms of evolution? I know esports is something you guys are entering. What would you like to conclude?
Yeah, so just to pick up on a point that Thomas just made, I think there's a fundamental distinction when people talk about OTT. We have a lot of our third-party broadcasters who are essentially becoming both digital and linear broadcasters, and that's an excellent development. It increases the range of content that they can offer. It probably targets a somewhat different audience than they might have had previously. That being a distinct activity from almost direct-to-consumer activity of a league or a federation. I think for the future, certainly for us, and I think for most sports properties, we'll continue to see probably a mixed economy between those two things. The third-party intermediaries are still incredibly effective. They're still an excellent source of money production, but there's a room for everyone to be able to serve a super fan, for instance, through their own OTT platform that is based around content from the rights holder.
All right, Jakob, did you want to say something? We please, really quickly.
Okay, so I mean, whatever you plan in the future, I mean, one thing probably stays in sports, you need to produce it very fast. So to have something that's happening right now, and you need to publish it as fast as possible, and you need to have efficiency. And that is basically what I think my parting words are. If you need those, speak with me.
Yeah, and I would urge everyone to reach out and contact the panelists here if you do have follow-up questions. And I'd like to thank the panelists as well as you, the audience. And I would like to invite you to our next digital conference, Next TV Series Europe in CEE on the 17th and 18th of November. And that's a wrap for us. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.